Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Middle Way Mom Reads, where we dig into books that enhance and inform our homeschooling journey. I'm Shannon, a homeschooling mom since 2009 and a student of the Islamic Sciences, working toward a bachelor's degree in Islamic Sciences from Mishka University, inshallah. I've been using the Charlotte Mason method since 2016, and I'm hoping that this series helps more parents realize the value of the Charlotte Mason method in their homes. We're starting with the most classic book in the Charlotte Mason method, the first book in her 6-volume series titled Home Education. We'll work through the book together, inshallah. I will discuss highlights of the book without the assumption that you have read it yourself, but of course, you'll gain a much greater understanding if you read the book as well. So today, we are picking back up with the section A Child's Estate and Offending the Children. So both of these titles aren't super obvious what we're going to talk about. The child's estate, she starts with the child in the midst. And we're not going to go over this in great detail, but she kind of opens with the question, so what's the nature of the child? She says, is he a tablet to be written upon, a twig to be bent, wax to be molded? And if we sit with this question for a little bit, we start to, discern how we see education. Is it, she gives an example later in the book of a child growing up like a bush. And if we don't trim here and there, then you get this unruly bush later on that you really have to kind of contend with. But if you do a little bit of effort here and a little bit effort there, then you get this this outcome when you're looking at this bush or a child even that is much more agreeable than trying to kind of let it be and then managing it later. But a lot of people kind of have this idea that they're like an empty bucket that you just kind of place knowledge in and then they just kind of hold on to it forever. So we'll kind of challenge that idea as we go through the book. She doesn't answer right away. I kind of, spoiler alert, I gave you, a little bit of how she sees this. But she does dive into the high regard for children mentioned in the Bible. She lists a poem. She goes through some of the common quotations that you'll hear from Christians that are from the Bible. She advises the reader to ponder every advice in the Gospels. And of course, for us, for the most part, we're going to look to the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Quran is not as direct in our understanding of how to raise children, but from the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we see a lot of examples of his interaction with children. But she does kind of sum up her position in this one sentence. Take heed that you offend not, despise not, hinder not one of these little ones. So these are not very well understood just at a surface level. Sometimes you can take a very simple statement and it's like this epiphany. I will say when I first read this, it's like, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, don't offend them. We have this idea of what offense means today, and I'll describe what she means by this in just a sec. Of course, we don't want to despise our children or hinder them. So she delves into this in the next couple sections. So today we'll just talk about offending the children. She says, let us look upon these 3 great laws as prohibitive in order to clear the ground for the consideration of a method of education. For if we once settle with ourselves what we may not do, we are greatly helped to see what we may do and must do. So she's going, and this is kind of how she organizes this. She clears the way of like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then a following section that inshallah we'll come to next time talks about do this, do this, do this. It reminds me of, the Shahada, right? La ilaha illallah. There is no God except Allah. So you clear the way. There's nothing. There's nothing here except Allah. So we're starting now with the section offending the children. She says, we offend them when we do by them that which we ought not to have done. And then going on to the other sections, we despise them when we leave undone those things which for their sakes we ought to have done. And then she goes on, since we're talking about offending the children in this one section, what is an offense? And again, some of these words, they use it a little bit differently 100 years ago than how we use them now. So she describes it as, she gives the example of a child who's just learning how to walk and all these things that are in their way. Somebody left toys out from the toddler, or, one of the older kids, they left toys out, or they left chairs in their way, or whatever. These are the offenses in their life. And so it reminded me of the offensive side of football, right? I'm not huge into football, but this little bit I do know. The whole point of the offensive side is to stop the other team from getting to their end goal. So if we think of offend in this way, where we're putting up hurdles or putting up blocks in another person's way for them to reach their goal, that's how she's using this. The next section, I really love this section. She says, children are born law-abiding beings with a sense of may and must not, of right and wrong. And then she goes on to say, who has not met big girls and boys, the children of right-minded parents, who yet do not know what must means, who are not moved by ought, whose hearts feel no stir at the solemn name of duty, who know no higher rule of life than I want, I don't want, I don't like. So she goes from saying children are law-abiding beings. They naturally want to do what's right. They naturally want to stay away from what's not right. And yet we meet children that are older, and they clearly, this has not stayed. If you have this idea of children, we have this as Muslims, right? That this is our fitra, right? We naturally we're inclined to do what is right and true and good. But there's offenses, there's things in our way of being able to do that. And so she gives that example of the child who is completely ruled by, I like this, I don't like that, I want to do this, I don't want to do that. And clearly this is not the end goal for most parents, because it's a really, really hard way to live as an adult if you don't have any sort of sense of duty, right, to your spouse, to your coworkers, to the people that you owe money to, right? If you don't have this sense of duty of, I have to pay this bill, well, you don't have a place to live. That's how things work. So we have to inculcate this, or I should say not inculcate, because we're functioning with this idea that children naturally have this inkling or this fitra. So to preserve that, she gives an example, and I think this is a really, really good example of a mom who sees her toddler put their hand in the sugar bowl or the cookie jar or what have you, and she laughs while saying, "Oh, you're so naughty." But she doesn't stop him from doing it. So the child learns that the mother can choose to let him do these things, right? And he learns that he can make her choose this way. She can make him choose, or I'm sorry, he can make her choose, and I'm using him just as general. He can make her choose to disregard that he shouldn't have a cookie before dinner. He shouldn't get up in the middle of the night and raid the fridge, or, this is usually how it starts with food, or not picking up their toys and these type of things. And so this line of thinking continues, she argues. If she can choose to do whatever she wishes, then so can he, right? And she says, henceforth, the child's life becomes an endless struggle to get his own way, a struggle in which a parent is pretty sure to be worsted. And here is another example of a word that we use differently now, meaning defeated, right? The parent is pretty sure to be gotten the better of. having so many things to think of while the child sticks persistently to the thing which is fancy for the moment. So think of this. The child wants a balloon, right? We see this, yeah. The child wants that balloon in the store. And the parent is thinking about, okay, I have this list. Did I bring coupons? Do I have everything on my list that I need? If you have young children, okay, we need to get through here before it's time to nurse again, before it's time to change a diaper. All of these things are running in the parent's mind. And she makes the case that if we kind of turn a blind eye again and again to these little things, right? To having the cookie, to just whatever it is that we say, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. But we, again and again, we say, oh, you're so naughty. You always do this. Kids will be kids. That in these moments, the child knows that they will get what they want because mom has this list in her mind that is wearing her down. And so when the child has this one particular goal, that they can be persistent at that. Um, it's we have for the adult, it's much harder to do these things, right? If I'm going to call, for instance, I had to call this company and they kept sending me around to all of these different phone trees and finally it ended in a recording and I was so frustrated. But like I didn't have it in me to like fight with them about it. I'm like, just tell me what I need to do and I will just do it. Like because I just didn't have it in me. Where the child doesn't have that list of I need to call the handyman, I need to pay this bill, so on and so forth. So they can push and push and push for that little balloon. Um, so she says that one way to offset this, the heading for this next section is they must perceive that their governors are law compelled. She calls out moms for not having a sense of duty. Now, this is where sometimes it can be a hard pill for us to swallow, to have somebody come out and say, like, what does she say? That the mother began with no sufficient sense of duty. She thought herself free to allow and disallow, to say and unsay at pleasure, as if the child were hers to do what she liked with. And if we remember from a previous episode, we talked about how there's this idea that it's not just your child. This child, of course, we understand that this child is an amana. This child is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have responsibilities that are due upon us because of this. And we should have that sense of duty in that sense. But also, this child is a child of the ummah. How are they going to use their talents and their knowledge and those type of things for the ummah and benefit the ummah? And it's that sense of duty that we have of how we are preparing this person to be a citizen of the wider world that we should really take seriously. So again, like I said, it's a hard pill to swallow, but we should ask ourselves, do we have this true sense of duty to our kids? Or do we treat them like a hurdle, like an offense to our own lives? I'm trying to achieve these goals and the kids are always asking me for whatever. I'm trying to read Quran and the kids are interrupting me again and again and again. This is, a mindset of which one is our duty and which one is, sunnah or, recommended or these type of things. So just to clarify our vision about what our duty is in the first place. And then going from this place of I ought, I should, I need to, she says, let the child perceive that his parents are law compelled as well as he, that they simply cannot allow him to do the things which have been forbidden, and he submits with the sweet meekness which belongs to his age. So, and this is not just, it's not, we should make sure, we should absolutely make sure that we don't only bring this up in terms of deen, that we don't only say, I have to pray, I have to fast, I have to pay this bill, I have to call this person back, I need to go to this meeting. All of these things in the secular world as well, we have responsibilities and we take those seriously. I wanted to take a moment to kind of talk about our culture tells us that everything is subjective. But as people of faith, we know that there really is right and wrong, true and good. There's truth, there's falsehood. And really, any person of faith would recognize this. If we look at even, you know, atheist, agnostic, wherever somebody's faith lies, when we people who don't necessarily subscribe to faith usually, in my experience, will say, I believe in science, right? I believe in science. So even from that perspective, there's still truth and there's still falsehood. And we saw this with the pandemic, where people were saying it's science, this is real. And so everybody has this of this is right, this is wrong, this is true, this is false. And we need to present this to our children in a way that there's some things that are that we can't budge on. And so when I'm telling you, you can't punch your sister, it's not, oh, you're so naughty, don't do that again, but like you don't stop them. It's, we must not do this. And sometimes we're going to explain to them, and sometimes they're not. She actually makes the case for not explaining to children, which is indicative of that period of parenting. I will say our time of parenting, sometimes I think we over explain. We previously read a book, um, Positive Parenting in the Muslim Home, if I remember correctly. That's the name of the book. It has like a teal cover. If you Google that, you should be able to find it. Um, and in that book, the authors, there's two authors, they make the case of like, yes, you can give your reasoning to your child of why something is the way that it is, but you don't have to convince them. If they say, well, I don't agree, or I don't see it that way, or like whatever, okay, you don't see it that way, but that's my reasoning. Just like I'm going to exercise for my health, whether I lose weight or I don't lose weight or get a six pack or I don't or whatever, like I'm doing this for longevity. And if somebody says, well, you need to be a BMI of whatever, well, that's not why I'm doing it. I don't need to convince you this way. I don't need to. And when we talk to people about homeschooling, we should keep this in mind as well. We don't have to convince them that what we're doing is right and good. Like they don't need to be on board with us in order for us to say, these are my reasons. And they can say, yeah, I don't see that as valid. And you're like, okay, well, those are my reasons. So moving on, she does say, actually, let's move to parents may offend their children by disregarding the laws of health. She goes on to kind of explain this, but this one's pretty clear. Are we feeding them good food? Are we making sure that they have activity? Are we bringing them to the dentist? Are we bringing them to the doctor when they're sick? These type of things. These are duties that we have. And we can say also to our children, to kind of tie this back to, we are duty bound as well, that it is my responsibility to make sure that you have a wide range of foods that you can eat, whether you enjoy it or not. That's kind of a different conversation, but like that I have presented to you healthy foods that are nourishing for you. And I didn't just say, okay, well, you want ho-hos for lunch, you can have ho-hos for lunch. I know a number of examples of people. I actually worked with a guy where he was like 25, something like that. And subhanAllah, I feel for him. He had about one tooth, and that one was decaying to a great degree. Everything else was either not there or like black nubs. The guy was 25 years old. And I was his supervisor, so it's, it's a fine line of what you ask and what you don't ask. But he brought it up at one point and he said, my parents allowed me to drink as much pop as I wanted to, or soda for people outside of the Midwest. My parents allowed me to drink as much soda as I wanted. And by the time I realized that it was ruining my teeth, it was too late. And the guy was about 25 and he was thinking of having the dentist pull everything and having dentures. This was not his fault. This was not his fault. And so this is a really extreme example. But, I think of there's one child I know that was allowed to just have Doritos for dinner. And then, so it's an uphill battle that we're creating for them by giving in again and again because, oh, well, they like it. It makes them happy. Okay, but later in life, they're going to have to pay those consequences when I read this other book that was about adrenal burnout, where we have so much caffeine and then we have Doritos and, we there's nothing real for our body to hold on to. And so people are having this burnout in their mid 20s, 30s, mid 30s, whatever. And it's because we don't know how to eat, which is, we'll talk about that later. Not to a great extent. I'm not going to get on this soapbox here, but this is a duty upon the parents to have this in their mind of, if I were to do this every day, if I were to let them eat, cookies every day for dinner, what implications would that have for their life 10 years from now? Okay, get off my soapbox here. She says, and of the intellectual life. So parents may offend their children by disregarding the laws of intellectual life. She says the child's intellectual life may be wrecked at its outset by a round of dreary, dawdling lessons in which definite progress is the last thing made or expected, and which, so far from educating in any true sense, stultify his wits in a way he never gets over. I love it. I should have looked this up. There's a statistic that, and it's over 50%. I feel like it's closer to the 60-70% range, if I remember correctly. So the majority of people after they graduate high school will never read a book again. This is, to think of, how many issues we come across, how many new things that we come across, just think of the last 10, 20 years. If we never read anything for the rest of our life, except Facebook posts and Twitter and whatever, how much would we gain? She says this child leaves the home schoolroom, or the schoolroom in general, I would argue, with a distaste for all manner of learning, an aversion to mental effort, which lasts them a lifetime. And then she gives an example of a girl in particular, not real fond of that example, but it's this shallow living that they divert to, this where you have no interest, and almost like a mocking to any kind of intellectual effort or any kind of intellectual discussion. And what we see now, in particular, because of social media, is that we hold on to these little sound bites, right? 140 character limit sound bites. And we hold on to that as if it's the absolute fact, and it's oversimplified, but this is all some are willing to do. And for us as parents, we should say, that's not okay with me. Or at the very least, I'm going to do my bit to make sure that that's not my child. What they do beyond, my upbringing, the upbringing that I provide for them, that's up to them. But at the very least, I'm going to fulfill the amana upon me. I'm going to fulfill this trust, and I'm going to place in front of them an intellectual life that is interesting. and I am going to show them that I am interested. She goes on to talk about the moral life, and she gives an example of a child that kind of feels left out. All the other siblings are loved on, right? She's basically talking about like middle child syndrome, where this child, everybody else is lavished upon and they're looked down upon. So I don't know. And we have smaller families now too. Like to have 3 children, um, when I was pregnant with my third, it was interesting how many people went, "Oh my gosh, 3? How can you handle it?" Like my parents' generation, like it was very normal to have 5 kids. So it's shocking to me how in one generation, 3 kids is a large amount of kids. So we might not be seeing this middle child syndrome as much. It might not be as relevant to us. But we can see parents who constantly criticize, who are always like, you could do better, or who have kind of a disinterest in their children. This is something that we have to watch for, because even if we feel that we are interested and we love them and we care about them, if we always have our phone in front of our face when they're talking to us, that seems like we're disinterested. And we'll talk more about the duty to teach morals. It might be the next section. I think she kind of comes across it a couple times. She kind of takes the spiral method with this. And that brings us to the end of this section. And so next time we're going to be talking about despising the children, hindering the children. And then we're going to start a really meaty section. It goes on for about 10 pages and just 10, 20 pages. And just to give you an idea, we usually cover about 5 pages each episode. So we'll go through that meaty section bit by bit. And that is called Conditions for Healthy Brain Activity. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that. That's where, we've talked a lot about method. We've talked a lot about philosophy of education. And that's the piece where it's like, okay, do this. Like she said, we're going to talk in these couple sections about don't do this, this, this. And then right after that, it's, do this, 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 this. So really looking forward to getting to that section with you guys, inshallah. So just as a reminder, you will gain added benefit by reading the book yourself. You can find it at most of your favorite retailers, alhamdulillah. You can also find a link to it in the description of this video or podcast. I will also put in the link for the book that I mentioned earlier. You can find me online as Middle Way Mom on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. On Instagram, I share our day-to-day homeschooling life through the Instagram stories, so you can check us out there. If you have any questions you'd like answered, you can always email those to Shannon@middlewaymom.com. That's SHANNEN @middlewaymom.com. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum.